Picture this. It's a Tuesday evening. The kids are your exes this week. The house is quiet in a way that still catches you off guard. Not peaceful quiet, just empty quiet. You've made dinner for one, watched something on TV you barely registered, and then, probably subconsciously, you pick up your phone. You open the App Store. You type in the name of a dating app. Your thumb hovers over the download button, pause. In that single moment of hesitation, there are at least four completely different versions of you trying to make this decision. There's a version who feels genuinely ready, who has done some work, who feels grounded, who is simply curious. Then there's a version who's lonely, but doesn't want to call it that. Then there's a version who noticed earlier this week that your ex updated their profile picture and felt something sharp and nameless when they did. And then there's a version who just wants to feel like a person again. Chosen, interesting, wanted, alive in a way that the last years of marriage quietly stopped making you feel. Here's what nobody tells you in that moment. All four of those versions feel exactly like readiness, and most of them are not. And here's what almost nobody tells you about what happens next. Without a certain kind of self-awareness, many people who swipe right on a new dating relationship are quietly swiping right on the same relationship they just left. Different face, same emotional dynamic, same nervous system, same unresolved material looking for resolution in a new person. That's what this episode is about. Welcome to the Conscious Divorce Podcast. I'm Justin Norad, certified divorce coach and founder of Reclaim and Reboot Transformational Coaching. The show is where we have real, honest, compassionate conversations about navigating divorce, not just surviving from it, not just thriving through it, but doing it with intention, clarity, and self-respect. Today, we're going to go deep on one of the questions I hear more than almost any other. When am I actually ready to date again? And how do I do it in a way that doesn't just recreate what I'm trying to leave behind? We're going to uncover the neuroscience of grief and how it quietly impairs your judgment. We're going to talk about something I call the mirror problem, why people tend to select similar emotional dynamics in new partners, and what the research actually shows about whether that's inevitable. We're going to do a framework I use with coaching clients for treating your past relationship as data rather than just a wound. And we're going to get practical. How to build your non-negotiables list. What belongs on it, what doesn't, and how to use it in discernment rather than as armor. But before we dive in, a quick but important note. I am a certified divorce coach and not a licensed attorney, therapist, psychologist, or mental health professional. Everything I share on this show is for educational and informational purposes only. And it's not a substitute for legal, therapeutic, financial, or any other professional advice. Every situation is different, and I strongly encourage you to work with qualified professionals, an attorney, a therapist, a financial advisor, for guidance specific to your personal circumstances. What we do here is help you think more clearly and more intentionally. All right, let's get into it. Before we talk about readiness, I want to ask you a question that nobody asks before they start dating again. Why do you actually want to? Most people assume their answer is, because I want a relationship. And maybe that's true, but wanting connection and being positioned to build a healthy connection are not the same thing. The difference lives entirely in what's underneath the wanting. Let me give you a scenario. Two people, both of them downloading the same dating app on a Friday evening. The first person has been separated for about 8 months. Life is stabilized. They're sleeping well. They actually enjoy their solo weekends, the quiet, the autonomy, the sense of their own rhythm returning. They feel genuine curiosity. Who else is out there? What might a different kind of relationship feel like? They're not in a hurry. A relationship would be an addition to a life that already feels like theirs. The second person downloads that app approximately 20 minutes after finding out their ex is seeing someone. They told themselves they've been thinking about it for a while anyways. Maybe they had, but the timing is not a coincidence. The motivation here isn't curiosity. It isn't even really loneliness. It's something older and sharper. The desire to not be the one who gets left behind. They need to prove something. Both people swipe right, both match, both go on dates, but they're operating from completely different emotional foundations. And that foundation shapes every decision they make from this point forward. How fast they move, what they overlook, what they attach to, and what it cost them when things didn't work out. The motivation that pulls people towards dating after divorce generally falls into one of 5 categories, and most people are running a combination of several simultaneously. Loneliness, real, human, and valid, but a problem when it creates urgency. When loneliness is driving, you may mistake relief for connection. You attach to the first person who makes the silence feel less loud. Validation, the need to prove to yourself, to your ex, or the world around you that you are desirable and okay and moving on. This one is sneaky because it can look identical to readiness from the outside. Distraction, Dating is a way to avoid sitting with feelings that feel unbearable. The feelings don't go away. They go underground and surface at the worst possible moments in a new relationship. Identity searching, the disorienting feeling of, I don't know who I am without this marriage, and the hope that a new relationship will tell you. It won't, but the impulse is deeply understandable. And the genuine readiness, the kind that comes from curiosity rather than desperation, the kind that doesn't need a relationship to complete anything. Here's a reflection question I give every coaching client at this stage. If no one showed a romantic interest in you for the next 12 months, not a match, not a date, not a text, what part of that would feel most uncomfortable? Sit with that. Your honest answer tells you more about your readiness than the amount of time since your divorce. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Grief is not just an emotion. It's a neurobiological event, and it does specific, measurable things to your brain, including to the parts that make decisions about new partners. Research on the neuroscience of divorce shows that going through a high conflict or emotionally intense separation activates the same stress systems as trauma. Chronic stress floods the body with cortisol. Cortisol impairs the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for long-term thinking, consequence evaluation, and emotional regulation. At the same time, it activates amygdala, the part that responds to threat, craving, and urgency. What this means practically, when you're in the middle of grief, even quiet grief, even grief that is faded to a low hum, your brain is biased towards short-term relief and away from long-term consequence. More likely to attach quickly, more likely to overlook red flags, more likely to interpret someone's sustained attention as deep connection before you have enough information to know whether that's true. A 2025 study found that acute stress impairs decision-making, specifically at higher levels of complexity, exactly the kind of complexity required to evaluate a new romantic partner. Research on cortisol found that elevated stress hormones are associated with heightened risk-taking, time pressure, and reduced decision quality. These are precisely the conditions that produce the most consequential mistakes in post-divorce dating. None of this is a character flaw. It's neuroscience, but it does mean that the timeline your nervous system wants to run on and the timeline that actually serves you may be different things. Calm does not automatically mean healed, and dating from calm but not healed is one of the most direct pathways to recreating the same relationship in a different body. By the time most people seriously consider dating again, the acute grief has subsided. Life is stable. The paperwork is nearly done. You feel fine, and fine can be very convincing. The paperwork is nearly done. You feel fine, and fine can be very convincing. But calm does not automatically mean healed. Healed means you've done the internal work on what happened, not just moved past it. It means you understand, at least roughly, your own role in the relationship dynamic, not just your partner's. It means the divorce has become something that happened to you and through you, rather than something that is still quietly happening inside you. Research suggests full integration after divorce typically takes 2 to 3 years for most people. Shorter with professional support, longer without. That doesn't mean you need to wait 2 to 3 years to date. It means you need to be honest with yourself about where you actually are versus where you wish you were. I want to specifically address dating while still legally separated, because this is one of the murkiest territories in this space and one where people make consequential decisions with insufficient information. The legal reality first. Dating while legally separated, but not yet divorced, carries real risks that can vary significantly by jurisdiction. In no-fault divorce states, dating during separation is generally not considered marital misconduct. In fault-based jurisdictions, it can constitute adultery, affecting alimony, property division, and in some cases, custody evaluations. I'm not a lawyer, and nothing here is legal advice. What I will say is, understand the laws of your specific jurisdiction before you date during separation. Talk to your attorney. The emotional reality of wanting to move and the legal reality of still being married can collide in ways that can cost you more than you expect. The emotional dimension is equally complex. Separation is a liminal space. You're neither married nor divorced. The relationship is ended in practice, but not in law, and that ambiguity creates specific psychological conditions. When you're still in separation, still negotiating, still co-parenting in real time, still dealing with the daily reality of a shared life being untangled, your attention is actively split. You cannot fully invest in something new while still deeply embedded in ending something old. There's also what I call the rebound acceleration effect. Everything in the separation window can feel urgent. The contrast between the ending relationship and the excitement of something new can be intoxicating, making your move much faster than you would any other emotional state. You might share more vulnerability, more future hopes, more of yourself than the relationship has yet earned. That intensity is real, but some of what you're feeling is a contrast effect, the relief of something good after something painful. Relief can be mistaken for recognition. Dating during separation doesn't mean catastrophe. It means the discernment needs to be evaluated, not lower. You're navigating emotional, legal, and practical stakes that are still simultaneously heightened. That calls for more patience, not less. Attachment theory is one of the most practically useful frameworks for understanding how you'll date after divorce. And it gets turned into pop psychology, more than almost any other concept in this space. So let's do it with some intellectual respect. The core idea: as children, we develop internal working models of relationship beliefs about whether other people will be available, responsive, and trustworthy. These models shape how we engage in adult romantic relationships, and they become especially visible when relationships end. 3 patterns matter most here. Secure attachment, the belief that connection is generally available, that ruptures can be repaired. Securely attached people grieve divorce more cleanly. They feel the loss, process it, and integrate it. They tend to take honest accountability for their role in what happened. And when they date again, they're better at reading compatibility signals because their emotional system isn't flooding them with panic or suppression. Anxious attachment, a hypervigilance to signs of abandonment, intense rumination after endings, a powerful drive to reconnect. Anxiously attached people experience post-divorce distress more intensely. They replay conversations. They can't stop checking their ex's social media. Here's what's genuinely interesting, though. Research published in PLOS ONE found for anxiously attached people, focusing on a new romantic interest can actually disrupt the lingering attachment to an ex. In other words, a rebound relationship, which gets a universally bad reputation, can serve an adaptive function for the specific attachment style. But the risk is premature emotional attachment, mistaking the relief of a new connection for genuine compatibility. Make sure you're being honest with yourself. Avoidant attachment, a self-protective distance from intimacy, a tendency to suppress emotional processing. Avoidantly attached people look like they've handled the divorce fine. They don't fall apart publicly. They may date again fairly quickly with apparent ease, but research shows they experience less personal growth following a dissolution, because the suppression means that learning never happens and the patterns repeat. Then there are people who exit high conflict or abusive marriages with what trauma-informed therapists call a reorganized attachment system, dysregulated by prolonged relational stress. This is where trauma bonding becomes relevant. Trauma bonding in relationships characterized by intermittent reinforcement, cycles of tension, rupture, and reconciliation. The reconciliation cycle floods the brain with dopamine and oxytocin, training the attachment system to associate intensity and volatility with love. People who've been in this dynamic often find that emotionally available, consistent new partners feel boring. There's no spark, and they may walk away from someone genuinely good for them because their nervous system has calibrated intensity as a proxy for connection. Learn to tell the difference between chemistry that is genuine and chemistry that is familiar. This is one of the most important and most difficult pieces of work in post-divorce readiness. There's a concept I want to introduce that I find more useful than almost any other framework in post-divorce work. I call it pattern gravity. Pattern gravity is a force that pulls you towards familiar emotional dynamics, regardless of whether those dynamics are healthy. It operates below the level of conscious reasoning. You don't think your way into it, you feel your way into it, usually before you've had a chance to examine what's happening. Your nervous system has built a template of what connection feels like based on your earliest attachment experiences in your relationship history. That template is not based on what's good for you. It's based on what's familiar, and familiar can absolutely include things that hurt you. Someone who spent years with an emotionally unavailable partner may find themselves usually drawn to someone who is slightly distant. The pursuit feels engaging. The uncertainty feels exciting. Someone who learned that love was conditional may be most attracted to people who make them earn affection. Someone whose role in the marriage was to manage their partner's emotional state may feel most at home when someone who needs managing, because competence in that role feels like belonging. None of this is chosen. None of this is a moral failing. That is why I call it gravity. You don't decide to fall towards it. You're just standing near the edge and physics takes over. Now, here's where the research becomes fascinating and a little uncomfortable. A 2021 study published in Social Sciences, More of the Same, comparing the personalities of ex-spouse and new partner after divorce, examined whether people actually pick similar personality profiles in partners after divorce. The answer? Measurably yes, at least for some people and some traits. And the landmark study published in PNAS found real personality consistency between people's ex-partners and their new partners based on that partner's own self-reports. This is the mirror problem. In meaningful ways, we often go looking for someone new and find someone familiar. I want to be specific about what this means and what it doesn't. Some consistency in partner preference is not pathological. If you're consistently drawn to people who are curious, kind, and reliable, that's a good pattern to have. The problem is when the traits you're consistently selecting include the ones that create the most damage in your marriage. Emotional unavailability, volatility, avoidance of accountability, controlling behavior, or the particular dynamic that made you feel simultaneously loved and diminished. Psychologically, this pattern has two names. Freud called it repetition compulsion, an unconscious drive to recreate familiar emotional dynamics, understood as an attempt at mastery. Maybe this time I can make it work differently. Modern attachment researchers frame it more precisely. The nervous system generates predictions based on past experience, and those predictions bias towards what we already understand, even when what we already understand has hurt us. But here's the genuinely good news, and I want you to hear this clearly. The same social science study also found support for what researchers call the learning hypothesis, that intentional reflection and deliberate effort can change this pattern. The repetition is not inevitable. It is a default. Without conscious examination, familiarity wins. With it, you can genuinely improve. Healthy attraction often feels calmer than what you're used to. This is one of the most counterintuitive truths in post-divorce data. If you've come from a high-intensity, high-conflict relationship, a genuinely stable, consistent, emotionally available person can feel underwhelming. No edge, no chase, no tightrope. And many people walk away from someone who would have been genuinely good for them because their nervous system has confused the absence of drama with the absence of chemistry. Calm is not boring. Consistency is not lack of passion. Emotional availability is not weakness. The goal is not to find someone who doesn't excite you. The goal is to expand your definition of exciting. And that takes exactly the kind of internal self-examination we're about. I want to offer you a shift in how you relate to your previous marriage or relationship, not as a wound to get past, not as a story about what went wrong or who was at fault, but as a data set. Because here's the thing, that relationship, even if it was painful, even if it was damaging, even if it ended in ways you're still working through, contains some of the most useful information available to you about who you are, what you genuinely need, and what you'll need to do differently this time. The question is whether you're willing to study it honestly rather than just survive it. Most people, when they think about their previous relationship, do one of two things. They replay it primarily as a story about what their partner did wrong, which protects the ego but produces very little learning, or they replay it as a story about their own failures, which is honest but tends towards self-blame rather than self-knowledge. The data approach is different. It asks, what does this relationship examined objectively tell me that I can use? I use a 3-lens framework with every coaching client preparing to date again. Lens 1, what does this relationship tell you about my own patterns? Not your partner's patterns, yours. What did you do, specifically, behaviorally? When were you unhappy? Did you go loud or go silent? Did you demand and push or accommodate and shrink? Did you communicate clearly about your needs or expect your partner to intuit them? Did you set the boundary when you saw it being crossed, or did you wait and hope the situation would change on its own? Think about the moments where things repeatedly broke down. What's your contribution to that dynamic? Not your partner's, yours. Not in a spirit of self-blame, in a spirit of honest data collection. Because those patterns, the ones you brought, the ones you repeated, the ones you didn't recognize until it was too late, are the specific places where your next relationship will ask you to show up differently. Knowing them in advance, rather than discovering them in the middle of a new relationship, is the single greatest competitive advantage you can give yourself going into this next chapter. Write them down, not as a confession, as preparation. Lens 2, what does this relationship tell me about what I genuinely need in a partner? Not what you thought you wanted at 28 or 33 when you got married. What you know now, based on your actual lived experience, what actually matters to you in a partnership. Think about the things you were missing, not just the things your partner did wrong, but the qualities, the dynamics, the felt experiences that were consistently absent or insufficient. What did you long for that you didn't have? What did you pretend didn't matter to you because asking for it felt like too much? Emotional presence, genuine curiosity about your inner life, conflict that felt reparable rather than threatening, a partner who took responsibility rather than deflecting, affection that was given freely rather than strategically. Whatever was absent, naming it clearly is not complaining about your ex. It's being honest about what you actually need. Lens 3. What does a stage of your life tell me about the kind of relationship I want to build? This one gets underused. When people think about dating after divorce, they often carry the same template they had in their 20s, the same assumption about what a relationship is supposed to look like, what partnership means, how love is supposed to be expressed. But you are not the same person you were when you got married. You have different commitments, different responsibilities if you have children, different clarity about what you want your life to feel like in 5 or 10 years, different financial realities, different things you're no longer willing to negotiate away. What does a good partnership look like for the specific version of your life? Not the life you had, not the life you expected to have, the life you're actually having right now. When you put those 3 lenses together, your patterns, your genuine needs, and your current life stage, you have something extremely useful, an honest, personalized, evidence-based starting point for knowing what you're actually looking for. And that is indefinitely more useful than a dating app, algorithm, or list of surface preferences. Let's talk about non-negotiables and flexibles. And this brings me to something I want to genuinely be practical about. How do you take everything you've just examined and translate it into an actual framework for evaluating potential partners? Because there's a real skill to this, and I think it gets underestimated. A 2022 study in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found something that's both reassuring and concerning. In practice, people are more flexible than they initially report being. On average, people didn't reject potential partners until they had encountered multiple deal breakers. Not one, which meant that in the moment, chemistry can rationalize a lot. It means that knowing your non-negotiables before you're charmed matters, because once you're charmed, the list tends to get quiet. So let's be specific. What is a non-negotiable? What is a flexible? And how do you build your own lists? A non-negotiable is not a preference. It's a value, a behavior, or a life condition that you know based on your actual experiences and your actual values to be genuinely essential. These are things whose absence has cost you something real in the past, or whose presence you know to be foundational to the life you're trying to build. They are not abstract, they are specific and behavioral based. Non-negotiable examples and why each one's on the list. Emotional availability, the capacity to be present, to engage with emotional content, and to take responsibility for emotional impact on one another. If emotional unavailability was the central wound in your previous relationship, this is not a nice to have. It's foundational and it's observable. You see it in whether someone asks you a question and actually listens to the answers, in whether they acknowledge whether they've hurt you, and whether they show up when things get hard. A functional approach to conflict, not the absence of conflict. Healthy relationships have conflict, but conflict that can remain respectful. The Gottman Institute research is unambiguous here. Contempt, criticism, stonewalling, and defensiveness, the 4 horsemen, are the most reliable predictors of relationship failure. How someone handles disagreement is non-negotiable information. Accountability. When someone makes a mistake, do they take responsibility for it, or do they deflect, minimize, and rewrite? Accountability is not about perfection. It's about the willingness to its own impact. This is observable from early in the relationship and is one of the most important character signals available to you. Financial honesty, not shared income level, not career status, a responsible, transparent relationship with money and commitments. Financial incompatibility, deception consistently rank among the top relationship stressors in the research. This doesn't mean you need to see a credit score on the 3rd date. It means that fundamental dishonesty about financial reality is a non-negotiable issue. Values alignment around parenting. If you have children, how a potential partner relates to your children, to the co-parenting situation you are navigating, and to the complexity of blended family life is not a preference. It's the foundation. And it takes time to assess, which is exactly why you wouldn't introduce your children too early. Sobriety, or an honest and healthy relationship with substances. If addiction or problematic use affected your previous relationship, this belongs on your non-negotiable list. Full stop. Now, a critical clarification. Your non-negotiable list should be short, 5 to 7 items maximum. If you have 15 non-negotiables, you don't have standards. You have armor, and armor keeps everyone out, including the people who would have been genuinely good for you. The function of a non-negotiables list is discernment, not protection from the discomfort of vulnerability. Flexibles, preferences that deserve opinions but not absolute criteria. Career status or income level. Within the bounds of genuine financial compatibility, where someone is in their career, what they do, or how much they make is a preference, not a non-negotiable. There's a meaningful difference between financially irresponsible, which is a non-negotiable, and not in the income bracket I expected. That's a preference. Age range. The range you think you're open to and the range you actually should be open to are often different. Our stated preferences on age are frequently more about aesthetic and social expectations than about genuine compatibility. Be willing to be surprised. Hobbies and interests. Shared interests create connection and are genuinely valuable. A compatibility of character is a far better predictor of long-term relationship quality than overlap in hobbies. You can learn to enjoy hiking as someone you love who is consistent, honest, and kind. You cannot sustain a relationship with someone who shares your exact activity preferences but cannot navigate conflict respectfully. Physical attraction is real, necessary, and a non-negotiable in its own right. But the specific physical template you believe you're drawn to is often far more flexible in practice than it appears on paper, particularly when genuine emotional connection, humor, and mutual curiosity are present. Give yourself room to be surprised by that. Divorce history. Whether someone has been divorced before is not in itself a deal breaker. How they relate to that experience is what matters. Do they speak about their ex with contempt or with something closer to equanimity? Have they done the work or are they still in reactive mode? Their relationship to their divorce is a window into the capacity of self-reflection. Use it. Geographic location. Particularly in an area of remote work and reconsidered geography, location is more negotiable than it used to be, at least in the early stages of exploration. Here's what I recommend doing with this. Write 2 lists. Your non-negotiables, the things that, based on your honest relationship data, you know to be genuinely essential. Keep them short, specific, and behavior-based. And your flexibles, the things you have real preference about but are genuinely willing to engage with rather than rule out. Then do something most people skip. Revisit both lists every 6 months because who you are and what you genuinely need is not static. Your understanding of what went wrong last time deepens. What matters to you evolves, and the list should evolve with you. Let's now talk about dating with kids. I want to spend some real time on this because the available guidance tends to fall into 2 unhelpful camps: oversimplified rules that ignore individual context or kids are resilient dismissal of real complexity. Neither actually helps. When you have children, you are managing 3 interconnected relationships simultaneously. Your relationship with the kids, your co-parenting relationship with your ex, and the new relationship you're building. These interact in ways that require active, thoughtful navigation, not just good intentions. Children generally need more time than adults to process family restructuring. Research suggests that children of divorced parents often hold reunification fantasies, the hope that their parents will get back together, for 1 to 3 years. The introduction of a new partner ends those fantasies. The behavior and emotional responses that sometimes follow are frequently misread as objections to the new person when they are actually about grief and about the family. That distinction matters enormously in how you respond. The clinical consensus: a committed relationship of at least 9 to 12 months is a reasonable threshold before introducing a new partner to your children. That's not 9 to 12 months after the divorce. It's 9 to 12 months into the new relationship. Younger children attach to new adults quickly. An early introduction followed by the relationship ending is another loss for a child who has already experienced significant loss. You protect your children by protecting your early dating life from them, not as deception, but as developmental appropriateness. Tell your co-parent before you tell your kids. Not because they have the veto power over your personal life. They don't, but because your children will hear this one way or another. If your ex finds out from the kids or social media, the reactive conflict lands on your children. Handling it proactively preserves the co-parenting relationship and, by extension, protects your kids. If you're in a high conflict co-parenting situation where your ex uses information about your personal life as leverage, where there is active litigation, where every conversation escalates, that context changes the calculus further. Not because you're required to live in secrecy, but because the intersection of your dating life and your children's stability requires an additional layer of intentionality that is genuinely hard to navigate alone. This is one of those situations where working with a family system, therapist, or an experienced divorce coach is not a luxury, it's a practical necessity. Let me close the content of today's episode with the things that matter most: what readiness actually looks like from the inside and what dating well actually means in practice. The platitudes are useless. You'll know when you're ready. Not always. Love yourself first. Too vague to act on. Time heals everything. Time is necessary, but not sufficient. Here is how I actually think about readiness: the difference between expansive and reactive. Reactive readiness feels like urgency. It's driven by something you're moving away from: loneliness, fear, or being alone. The need to close the chapter. It makes you compromise earlier than you should, attach faster than is wise, and overlook things your more grounded self would notice. Expansive readiness feels like curiosity. Your life is already reasonably yours. A relationship would be an addition rather than a rescue. 6 markers of genuine readiness. First, you can think about your ex without emotional flooding. Not without any feeling, but without the spikes that indicate you're still in the acute processing phase. Second, genuine comfort with your own company. Third, honest, non-defensive accountability for your role in what happened. Fourth, rebuild self-trust, the capacity to observe someone's behavior over time and trust what you actually see. Fifth, curiosity about the other person, not primarily belief that they're interested in you. And sixth, the belief that a new partner would add to a life that already feels like yours. In terms of how to date well, pace is protective, not punitive. Your boundaries reveal character in yourself and in whoever you're with. Attraction and alignment are not the same thing. The goal of dating is discernment, not relationship acquisition as quickly as possible. In getting professional support, coaching, or therapy during this period is not a sign something is wrong with you. It's a sign you understand the stakes and you're working on yourself. And take your non-negotiables list in every new encounter, not as a checklist, as a filter. Give it time to work. Chemistry can rationalize almost anything. Your list cannot be charmed. That is precisely why you wrote it when you were clear-headed. I want to come back to where we started. That Tuesday evening, the quiet house, the thumb hovering over the download button. Here's what I'd say to you in that moment. Before you swipe, take 20 seconds to be honest with yourself about 2 things. First, which version of you is making the right decision now? The curious one, the lonely one, the one who just found out their ex is dating, or the one who finally feels grounded and genuinely ready? And second, do you honestly know what you're looking for? Not just the feeling of it, but the substance of it, your patterns, your genuine needs, your actual non-negotiables. Because the quality of your next relationship is not determined by who's on the app. It's determined by who you are, when you get on it. The story you're writing in the next chapter doesn't begin with a match. It begins with clarity, or the lack of clarity, you bring to the first swipe. Pattern gravity is real. The mirror problem is real, but neither is destiny. You can study yourself. You can build your list. You can approach this with intention rather than reaction. And when you do, you're doing something genuinely different from what most people do. And that difference is the whole thing. This is what it means to date consciously after divorce. If today's episode was useful, share it with someone who needs it. This is the kind of conversation that changes the trajectory of someone's next chapter when it arrives at exactly the right time. And if you're at a place where you want something more personalized, a real thinking partner, someone who can help you do this work with the depth it deserves, that's what the coaching work at Reclaim and Reboot is for. You can find me at reclaimandreboot.me. Everything is there, including lots of downloads. Until next time, stay conscious, stay curious, and build from clarity. I'm Justin Milrad. This is a Conscious Divorce podcast, and thank you for being here. And one last thing, don't forget to check out my book, You 2.0, and the You 2.0 workbook, both available on Amazon.com. Have an amazing day.